when you were deployed to Vietnam and you went out on the missions.
Do you find that a lot of them have had issues with contextualizing the killing?
Most veterans have never participated in anything like that.
If it's you're defending yourself, you're defending your position, you're defending your men that are with you. Hey everyone, welcome to the Base Camp Hope podcast. I'm John, this is Diane, and we've got a pretty fascinating subject for you today. So, Diane, what are we going to be talking on?
We're talking about, you guys talked about the Bible study we're doing last time, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of how it got started and talk about what the actual first subject of the Bible study was. So throughout the years before Base Camp Hope started, I was doing something called stand downs, where it was kind of a veteran fair where everybody would come and see what their service was, and I ran the chaplain's table, and then when Base Camp Hope started, it was a dual chaplain table and Base Camp Hope. And one time I got this veteran that showed up, and he was a Vietnam veteran, and faith has always been an integral part of what we've done with Base Camp Hope. And he said, I know what the Bible says about salvation, that, it's for everybody. I know what salvation is, but those 3 guys that I had to kill in Vietnam, if they're not in heaven, I don't want to be there. And so basically what I did, I took them back. I said, okay, and you got to remember now a little bit of history that during Vietnam, the men were drafted, and you didn't have a choice. A lot of men went to Canada and did that type of thing, but most of the men were honorable and obeyed their draft orders. And so he was drafted, and I said, now, when you were drafted, was that your idea to enlist? He says, no, I was obedient to the government. I said, when you went through Base Camp Hope, was it your idea to learn how to shoot at your fellow human being and kill people? Well, no, that was part of the training. When you were deployed to Vietnam and you went out on the missions where you had to shoot these 3 men, was that your idea to go out on the mission? No, I was ordered to go out on the mission. When you were out there with your squad and you recognized the danger, did you order yourself to actually shoot the men, or did you shoot the men because you were protecting your men and you were protecting your lives? He says, yeah, I was protecting my men and I was protecting my life. And I said, okay, so none of these were your decision to cause the death of these 3 men that you died. No, none of that was my decision. I said, okay, now let's take a look at what God actually says. Most people get tripped up with the 10 Commandments, where it says, thou shalt not kill. And unfortunately, that has been translated as thou shalt not murder. And there is a huge difference when you get into the exegesis, which is a big fancy words for defending understanding what the Bible actually says. The 10 Commandments, actually, it says thou shalt not kill, and it's killing. Thou shalt not murder. Correction there. And the murder is an intentional act to deliberately plan out and go kill somebody. And when the Bible talks about killing during a combat situation, it actually talks about that this is a killing that, believe it or not, God does approve of out of necessity to protect your homeland and your family. And he listened to everything I had to say, and he says, yeah, I've never thought of it that way before. I've got to go home and think about this. I'm not sure what to do with this information quite yet. And so he went home, and the next year that particular stand down came up, and he wasn't there. And for you that don't know, we do have 22 veterans a day kill themselves, and I was like, oh man. He became one of the 22. He's not here, because if he had made a decision, I was pretty sure I'd see him again. And then the next year we were at a different stand down, and this guy comes up. He says, I've been thinking about what you told me, and I've spoken to thousands of veterans by this time since that first conversation, and I'm trying to place the guy. And he says, everything you said was right. I finally turned everything over to God, and this weight's been lifted off my shoulders. And I just like, so I encouraged him a bit. I still had no idea who this guy was. And he left, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, that's the guy. But I didn't recognize him because when I first talked to him, he was so depressed because of the weight he was carrying. And the weight had been lifted off his shoulders, and there was a new countenance about him and stuff like that. And so that is why I started writing the Bible study. So the first Bible study is called Killing versus Murder, What Does the Bible Really Say? And we've taken a look at different people, like David was actually my original emphasis. And then I started realizing, there's a warrior before David, but who's the first warrior that the Bible mentions? And it ends up going back to actually Abraham is the first warrior that is mentioned. But then as we started taking a look at it, we realized, well, what is the emphasis? Why do we go to war? Why is there a necessity for war? Why is there a necessity for a militia? And we go back to the second generation, to Cain, where he killed his brother, and he kind of became a wild man where the surrounding communities needed to protect themselves against what he was doing. He probably ended up with a following and had a that's not supported in the Bible, so don't quote me on that one. But and so anyway, so because of Cain and sin, we end up needing to protect ourselves. We ended up needing to have a militia, and so militia basically started at the very beginning. And you've covered a lot on Cain and Adam and Eve and stuff like that in the Bible study.
Yes, yeah. So talking about, like, educating, right, veterans on the difference between killing versus murder, right? Do you find that a lot of them have had issues with contextualizing the killing, right? Because,
Yes.
okay, you read the Bible, there's a lot of killing that happens in the Bible. Newsflash, right? So, like, if you haven't read the Bible, if you're not familiar with Bible stories, there's a lot of killing that happens. There's even some, and it's justified. The justified killing also covers murder as well. But it sounds like, what you're saying to me is like a lot of veterans have had issues with trying to contextualize, right? Because they think that even just murder is, taking a life is just murder.
Yeah.
End of story, right?
And it comes down to the mistranslation that the commandment says kill. Commandment says murder, and then it differentiates killing and murder.
Right.
And so a lot of us grew up with...
the original translation was "thou shalt not kill," right?
No, the original translation was
thou
shalt not murder.
Murder, okay.
And murder is the deliberate act of viciously taking a life, which is different than a combat killing.
Mm-hmm.
And so because we mix up those two, a lot of combat veterans come back and say, well, I've broken the biggest commandment of all. I've murdered somebody. And in combat, it is not murder unless we have incidences throughout world history where it was, coming in and wiping out a village that, innocent civilians and stuff like that. And, in that case, that was murder, but most veterans have never participated in anything like that. That's a few and the exception. But veterans in a combat situation, it is not murder. It is killing that God is not surprised by. God is not shocked by. And he understands that you are a soldier, you're a warrior, you're a Marine, you're airman, you're Navy, and that because of that, you are going to be required to possibly take another human's life. And like I said, God is not surprised by that.
Well, and so just to kind of get a little background too. So, like, when we say so they were in the original text said "thou shalt not murder," that doesn't mean so. The reason why it originally said murder and not kill, right, is because when it was originally translated from the original language, right, which was it Hebrew, right?
It would have been Hebrew.
So they didn't give the most accurate translation. So the thing to realize about biblical texts, they always look at context. They always look at how it's written. there's a difference between the Hebrew that the language is written in, the older Hebrew versus the newer, more modern Hebrew. So there's a lot of differences. So what they did is they went and they looked back at those texts, those original manuscripts, and they said, okay, well, that's not the most accurate translation. So there was a need throughout time, and it's happened through with the Bible. So it's not that the Bible's changing, it's just that they're realizing that the original translation was not the most accurate way to translate that word. So, and that's where we get the whole difference now. So it used to say thou shalt not kill, now it says thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
You should not murder. So
And
that's the reason for all of that.
For all the confusion. And then an example I use as trouble with translation is the word meek in our society means this little mouse in the corner that's scared to do anything.
Yeah.
That is not what the biblical meaning of the word meek. Meek is actually an example that I was given. It means power under control.
Yep.
And the example I was given was the Roman war horses. These were highly trained animals that when they were in the warfare then was you were close combat and body to body, blow to blow. And these animals were trained to protect the rider. They were trained that when these foot soldiers came up to them, that they were kicking and stomping the foot soldiers so that they would not get near their rider. And so this was a animal that the foot soldiers did not want to go up against. But then the same animal could go into the middle of a marketplace and kids could be hugging its legs, pulling its tail and its mane, and it would not react. And that was the example of power under control. And so sometimes we run into the lack of proper words to translate into another language, and this is kind of how the murder versus killing got mixed up. And so God is telling us not to murder. He is not saying that it is evil for you to... War is never good. But he's not saying that the soldier who has to kill in wartime is evil.
Well, and the interesting thing is our laws, right, actually follow biblical principles. So, in the way our laws are written, right, so if you kill somebody out of self-defense, that's a defensible position to go into a court of law with, right, and say, it was a justified killing because it was either going to be my family and me or them, right? Mm-hmm. So versus I went into this guy's house and I killed him in the middle of the night just because he looked at me funny at the supermarket. So even within our laws, it follows that same biblical principle. And I think that's a really important distinction for people to know and realize, right, that. So in war, if it's you're defending yourself, you're defending your position, defending your men that are with you, and you're defending them against an enemy who's trying to come and kill you. So in war, so even in modern war, that's a justified killing. That's correct. Something that, because if you as a soldier do not engage the enemy and take them out, then it's going to be disaster for your forces, for your military, mm-hmm. right? So and I think that's the idea, and that's the thing that we have to understand. Yes, war happens. Yeah, it's a very individualized, I think, it's a very individualized experience, I guess you could say, because if you're engaged in combat, I mean, I'm not a combat veteran.
I'm not either.
But some of the guys that I've talked to, they tell you the story from their own point of view. Mm-hmm. I've watched many different stories where they've talked about the individual, or they've talked about the experience from their own individualistic point of view. So, and I think that's an important thing to understand too. So, like, if you're ordered to kill the enemy, then, and you obey that order, I mean, that's a lawful order.
Yes.
So, so I think it's important for veterans and even non-veterans to understand, because, if somebody is like dealing with PTSD because they had to kill somebody, it's important to try and understand it in that context.
Correct. Yep. So. And that's, the gentleman that is a reason that I started writing the Bible study in the first place, realized that. He realized that, he was ordered to do it. He had actually no control over that situation. If he hadn't taken those 3 men's lives in a combat situation, that they would have taken the lives of his squad, his platoon. And so he was doing the right thing at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that we seek out war or anything like that. Even those of us that are veterans, we don't want to kill. We don't want to seek out war. We don't want to go find somebody that is doing something wrong and like, you're doing it wrong, I'm going to take you.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the veteran mindset at all.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of the, best examples that I can think of. So Band of Brothers, Dick Winters, who is the leader of Easy Company, in the book and even in the series, right? There's a point in there where he says, that I think it was after D-Day. He said that, after that day had happened, he made the decision that at that point in his life, after he was done fighting, he was going to live a life of peace. And then towards the end of the series, there's a point where there's a German colonel who's surrendering to Major Winters, and he hands him his sidearm. Now, in the series, it says that he said he could keep his sidearm, but in reality, he actually kept the sidearm, which was a German Luger. He found out after the fact that Luger had never been fired.
Oh, wow.
And he kept it unfired. He never fired the gun. And he said that's because to him that represented, that peace, right? So It was a peaceful surrender. He surrendered his sidearm, and he kept that sidearm. And, that kind of harkens back, too, to the power under control kind of thing, right? I mean, firearms can be used for great violence, or they can be used in a good way. And there are also those firearms that have never been fired. So it kind of like, it almost falls into place with that idea of like that power under control kind of thing.
Well, when you think about it, veterans are power under control. So if you run across a veteran, you can say, hey, you're meek. But then you explain yourself quick.
Yes, because you might get punched. Just saying.
Yeah, and we've learned that power under control. We've learned we know what we can do, but we know what we should do.
Yeah. Well, it's better to be a gardener or a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, it's and people in my experience, they tend to look at things, they try to paint everything with a broad brush, right? So like killing and murdering, they try to do that broad stroke, and it's like, life takes place in the minutia of things. And if you're not willing to dig down and look deeper into stuff, so like the killing versus murdering, which inspired the start of the Veterans Bible Study. That's why you wrote the very first Bible study that we ever did, was diving down into those details and those important things to understand and contextualize the difference between killing versus murdering.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the examples that I use in that Bible study is King David. The Bible says he is a man after God's own heart. He was a warrior. He started out as a grunt. He became commander-in-chief, but he's also a murderer. And when the Bible talks about King David, that he came back and they celebrated his thousands of kills, which is what made Saul jealous of him. But then when he murdered Uriah, because he had slept with Uriah's wife,
Bathsheba,
it's a different word. It uses the word murder, but his kills it's killed in battle, in combat. And so King David is a example of what the Bible actually says about killing versus murder. Yes. My tongue's not working today.
Well, and David is also one of those great examples of redemption too, I think.
Exactly.
Because he wrote this, the psalm that, even if you're not a Christian, you may be familiar, creating me a clean heart, oh God. That was a psalm he wrote after he committed murder. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's like, that's one of the things that I think Base Camp Hope is about, is that idea of redemption. Like, if you're down and out and you're feeling hopeless and things like that, there are organizations, and we're one of them, that can help veterans come out of that mire and that muck and get them out of, and get them on a path where they can, be redeemed, and they can feel like they're redeemed, rather than just, you're concentrating on the one little small, not that military service is a small part of your life, but you're concentrating on the one part of your life. I had to take a life, and I killed this individual, or you're thinking you murdered that individual. It's like, that's one of our main goals, or it's one of our main drivers, is we want to help people, understand those types of things.
Correct. And, because you've had to take a life in combat, that does not make you an evil person. It does not make you a wicked person. It just makes you a person that did their duty. It makes you a person that knows the cost more than most of us of what life is truly about, and also knows the cost of living your life to the fullest in a sense. But the cost that combat takes in your life. The cost that peace takes in your life too.
Yeah, absolutely. And living a life of peace after you've been in combat, I think, brings a very unique perspective to your life. I think at that point in time, I've never been in war, but I've seen the results of war. I mean, I've been to Iraq, and that was after, both Iraq conflicts. I mean, you see a lot of the signs, and you see the destruction and things like that. I've seen the results of suicide bombings. I mean, they're violent, they're horrible. I mean, just terrible things. And it's when you see that kind of stuff, you have to be able to contextualize, I think, and you have to be able to look at things like that, because they are traumatic experiences. They can be very traumatic experiences, but and sometimes you get caught up in the trauma, and and you have to be able to deal with, I think, that on an it's because it is an individual basis. Mm-hmm. Every combat veteran has had to deal with them being in combat on an individual basis.
And I think along that lines, that's where faith in God comes in a lot. Is without that faith in God to fall back on, a lot of I think that's where a lot of the 22 comes from, is that they couldn't find that forgiveness within themselves, and it's okay to accept the forgiveness, to accept that it was something that you had to do, and not something that you deliberately did.
Yeah, and 22 is too many. 1 is too many.
Yep.
As far as I'm concerned. And I'm thankful for the programs out there, because there's the 22 a day. I don't know if it's an organization or just
you're thinking of 23.
Was it 23?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are different organizations out there and I'm thankful that those organizations are there, because they make people aware of the fact that this is a statistic, and mm-hmm. it does happen, and there are people out there actually struggling with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's come a long, long way, even since I went in the military in 98. It's come a long, long way even since then.
Yeah, it wasn't even talked about when I was in, and that's why we have the 24-hour call line. Is you're feeling suicidal, you're feeling down about what you did in the service, the nightmares, whatever it is. That's what the 24-hour call line is about, and you'll see the number on the screen. Feel free to call it anytime you want, or text. We answer text most of the time.
Yep. Or, if you just want to talk, or if you just need prayer, or, if you feel lost, call, text, do whatever, just reach out. And that's really the main point, is just reach out. Because if you keep it within yourself and you don't reach out, and you never make that effort to come out of that shell, that can be very destructive to you as a person. And even non-combat veterans. So you don't have to be a combat veteran to reach out to us. Any veteran can reach out.
Correct.
So
just remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. We're brothers and sisters, not only in arms, but in the Lord also.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, so we're going to wrap up here. If you guys would like to support Base Camp Hope, we have these wonderful wooden coins. It's a challenge coin, and they're engraved, laser engraved on both sides, and it has our mission statement on there and things like that. They're $10, right? $10 a piece.
$10 donation, yes.
So $10 donation. Please reach out to us. We'd love to send you one. The other thing you can do is if you're looking for a Bible, we have these wonderful camouflage Bibles. We have mostly one version. I think this is one of the last actual desert camo ones that we have, but we also have a woodland camo one as well. We'd love to send you one of these completely free of charge. We'd cover the postage on that. And then we have these New Testament ones as well. And they're both NIV, so New International Version. They're very easy to read, very easy to understand. So it's not like the these and thous kind of thing. So if you don't have a Bible, please ask for one. We'd love to send you one.
And if you get it and you don't understand it, call us and we'll tell you about it.
Yeah, we'd love to. So, and then two, get connected with a local church. I mean, that's the other thing too. Don't rely on just on people that are online. Don't rely just on this podcast. There's so much more to living a Christian life than just, what you see here. So
with that, thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you in the next podcast.
Take care.